All right, so I'm going to apologize and thank the sound guy in advance. Hopefully I don't move around too much and do the high-low thing. If you looked at the schedule, you might have noticed my presentation was titled Presentation. I also realized it was titled Presentation. Apparently I forgot to tell Jason what the title of my presentation was. But also I had like 4 different versions of the title, so I felt like not only did he not ask, but I didn't tell him. So we're just gonna call it Presentation. No, but really, what are we talking about today? So this is kind of the, generic official title, the main topic of discussion. Have we finally reached #monitoring-love? But if so, why does logging still suck? So this is kind of a super boring talk title in my mind because, it's too specific. That's what you're going to talk about. It's got to be something funnier, relevant, maybe culturally significant. It's got to have a meme in it of some kind. So here's the other ones I had that I thought were pretty good. All logs are wrong, but some are useful. Monitoring the bad parts. And then I just took a DNA test. Turns out I'm 100% sick of logs. I'm glad people got that one. I mean, it's a technical conference. You never know if anyone gets a Lizzo, joke in here. But for all of you that know that song, you're singing it in your head right now, like thumbs up. So all of those are equally bad. So that's why I'm just calling it the Untitled Monitoring Talk, which is also just a shameless rip from that super popular Goose game that I've not even played this game. I've got kids. I have 0 time for video games. So got to have an agenda. What are we going to talk about? So let's rewind back to the bad old days. We're going to complain that logging got left behind. We can cross off the beat Jason at ping pong. Already took care of that. Don't listen to him. He's he's very adamant about ping pong. And while I have not beat him, I like to believe in my own little world that I have. So we're going to show some great login examples. But at the end, I want to give you some actionable advice to improve. So, who am I? I am Pete Cheslock. I'm going to talk about kind of this monitoring and observability world and really discuss how things have changed so dramatically over the last 8 or 10 years or so. I tweet at Pete Cheslock, and during the week, it's kind of hot takes on technology. On the weekends, it's mostly Pete's meat tweets, where I show all the delicious kind of meats that I'm cooking. I'm a suburban dad, so of course I have a smoker. It's actually the law. You might wonder too that I'm professionally unaffiliated, so then what does that mean? It means I don't have a job, but then if I did have a job, I would be wearing the t-shirt of my company or something like that. So I feel like the most on brand for me right now is the fact that I am wearing the t-shirt from my butcher from my hometown, Frank's Market, Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is extremely on brand for me. So I shitpost on LinkedIn. I was a product person for a while, so that's where I engage with my audience. It was LinkedIn. I don't do that anymore, thank goodness. But like I said, I'm professionally unaffiliated. I've moved on from my last startup. I'm working on some side projects, helping to consult with and advise with startups. I have a blog that's at pete.wtf. I think it's the best use of the WTF vanity domain. It's like a $50 domain too, total ripoff. I never update it, so just don't even bother going there because there's nothing of value there. I really do, in all seriousness, really want to write some new content. Blogging is one of those things like you just got to get in the good motion of. So, but I do have good intentions, but that is also, as you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, due to luck and circumstance, I have been to every Monitorama in the United States. And mostly it's just because the first Monitorama was in Boston, which is where I'm from. It's amazing to watch how quickly everything has evolved in this space, even just from that 2013 timeframe. The future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. Many folks are still trying to figure out and learn their way through this space. There's just so much, there's just too much of everything. But again, because I'm professionally unaffiliated, now my career has shifted kind of a bit. In the last 20 years of doing this, it's kind of crazy to think I've been at this for like 20 years. My job, my role in the company, it pretty much looks something like this, right? But now I get to do this. It's great. But the beauty is I am not here representing any company. For probably the first time in my life, giving a talk where I don't represent a company. It means I'm not kind of quietly shilling my own product. I don't even have a product to shill. So this talk is not only a cry for help to this audience, but it's also hope for the future because I think there's some awesome things that we can build together, and we've seen it already. We've seen amazing technologies that come out of these events here. But at the end of the day, I hope I can inspire you to understand the pain that people suffer with in monitoring their applications. And really, honestly, a lot of this is just based on kind of what I see in the market, what I've seen when talking to customers, when just trying to do this myself and just talking to other people. So Most importantly, though, is I, for the most part, only work at startups. So startups have, so this is going to be heavily biased towards the startup world. And in startups, we have constraints, very unique constraints that many other businesses don't have. So things like we don't have any money, we definitely don't have any time, and to be honest, everything is completely on fire. So the lack of money at most startups sadly drives a lot of the decisions. Every day at a startup, the money, bank account going lower and lower. And so if you're at a big, like, publicly traded company, you see a cool service, you just go buy it and use it. You probably have a budget. I don't even know what that is. You're like, well, I have this budget, I can buy whatever I want. Like, that is so foreign to me. Someone else gets the bill, it's great. And for those of you people that get to do that, I'm super jealous because I've never had that opportunity before. And maybe for you, you've got all the money and all the time in the world and just everything's on fire. But who cares? Because you've got all this money and time on your hands. You can just throw money at the problem. So there are also some folks and other monitoring companies out there who think that there's only one right way to monitor, that they're gonna give you a single pane of glass and there will be no pane to that glass, right? It's gonna be the pane, it's beautiful, you only have to go to one place. That's never gonna happen. I'm sorry, monitoring companies, you'll never build a single pane of glass. We dealt with the same thing when talking about monitoring and observability. We dealt with this exact same thing in the DevOps world. Is it sysadmin? Is it DevOps? Is it continuous integration? Is it DevOps? Look, no one knows. So just market towards it, buy the terms on Google, it's fine. You can't outmarket stupidity, so just go for it. We've moved on from the Nagios world, I hope, and MRTG and Cacti, and just wanting to know if our Exchange server is online or not. Every company is different though, and we all optimize for different things. We all have different items we care about. So I want to kind of pose a question. I don't actually want any of you to answer it. I'll answer it for you later. Is monitoring better than it was 10 years ago? Or have the trade-offs and the pain just shifted elsewhere? So just think about that. So let's go back to the beginning, but not really the beginning because I'm just gonna go back 10 years because it's convenient for me. So in 2009, I was working at a really awesome startup. We were extremely early into Amazon, and it was a company called Sonian, which no one's ever heard of, it's fine. We were an email archiving company, which is also pretty boring. But what was very cool is that we were so early into Amazon Web Services that we ended up being like the 3rd largest user of S3 and the 5th largest user of EBS. Although that EBS thing actually counted about 300 terabytes of EBS that I just found in an account one day. We had like 20 or 30 Amazon accounts. It was unattached. They keep charging you for it. And so I was like, oh, like this is unattached, we don't need it anymore, and I deleted it. And then I actually later on found out through a friend of mine who works at Amazon that at the time I did that, it probably represented somewhere between a single and double-digit percentage of global EBS capacity. That was just hanging out in an account one day. So I either made the EBS team like super sad or super happy, I'm not sure which. We had a lot of automation, shocking levels of automation for a company that was so early in the cloud. We were a Puppet shop originally because Chef didn't even exist. Later we moved over to Chef for reasons. We ran about 500 servers on EC2, which right now seems tiny, but at the time was insane. And we had it split across 10 or 20 Amazon accounts. And the reason we did that was, does anyone remember the limits on S3? You can only have 100 buckets per account. Well, we made terrible architectural decisions and we just created buckets for like every customer because we're like, oh, that's a future problem. We have more than 100 customers, that'll be great. And then we had thousands of customers and we were like, wow, we are in serious trouble here. And we asked Amazon, we're like, please give us more buckets. And they're like, no. It was like the one limit they would not change until last few years. This was also before IAM. So like one root access key per account, and we had like 20 accounts, and that root access key could do anything you wanted. It was insane. Nagios was by far the least terrible thing that we were dealing with at the time, and I think that says a lot. But we had a Nagios server in every single environment, and they all kind of reported back to a main Nagios server in our account. We invested so much time to get this to work. We all just hated it. It's inconsistency for dealing with cloud workloads. So then Sean was on our team right now, posted this tweet out, Nagios sucks, but we all put up with it. And thank goodness we have config management to make it bearable. But even with config management, our Nagios config was millions of lines of config. So Sean's tweet actually hit a sore spot that I think others in the community were really feeling about this time. John Vincent opened up a chat session on Freenode. For all you kids in the audience, Freenode is what we all used before before Slack. It's an IRC network. I'm assuming people are still on it, but I think everyone else has moved to Slack. I think this might be the first use of the monitoring sucks hashtag, but I also laugh because like it's kind of fucked up a little bit with the double hashtag. And I don't know if it's an accident or an artifact from TweetDeck, but I still thought it was pretty funny. So after that meetup, they created an org on GitHub called Monitoring Sucks. Now, not a lot of people will remember this one, but you get socks, right? Everyone who got their socks when they checked in. So Jason made this joke, and it's a dad joke quality right here at the first Monitorama, which was, these are your monitoring socks, because monitoring sucks, because that's why Monitorama happened, because monitoring sucks. So it was like the monitoring sucks socks? I don't know. It was dad joke level, right, Jason? Yeah. Anyway, the community was getting extremely upset with the tooling around monitoring. So then John wrote this great blog post, and there's a link here. These slides will be available afterwards. And he wasn't saying that monitoring itself sucked. Monitoring was actually really awesome, and there was a lot of fun stuff within monitoring. The tools were just inadequate and were not keeping up with the technologies we were dealing with. The world of software and infrastructure was moving too fast, and monitoring was falling far behind. He had this quote from here, and I really liked it, just kind of more throwing shade at the quote, sysadmins there. It's like, I could cobble together a hot mess of open source technology to get what I need, but at what point does this just become an anti-pattern? So what John wanted was to get this group of motivated engineers together that were equally frustrated with these problems and go out there and try to solve it and just kind of go after that status quo. And that's exactly what people did. It was amazing to see. So after that initial chat session, we at Sonian had just enough Nagios. To this day, it used to alert out at the exact same time, GMT midnight. Every alert would reset. It would just re-alert everyone out. No one could figure out why. It was ridiculous. But what was crazy is we were an aggressive user of Spot instances on Amazon. So hundreds of hosts would scale up and scale down. The problem is you couldn't run Chef more than every 30 minutes because the load was too high. So every 30 minutes Chef would run, it would find a Spot instance, it would add it to the Nagios config. Then you had to wait another 30 minutes for the main Nagios server to run Chef to load its config. You'd have an hour between a host being provisioned and being accessible and knowledgeable in Nagios. So if something broke within 30 minutes, you were completely missing that information. Now, being an hour to turn on monitoring in the, quote, old days, when it takes you 3 days to provision a bare metal server, who cares? But we're talking servers with a lifetime of minutes to hours. Now we talk about containers with lifetimes of maybe milliseconds, right? You have to respond a lot faster. So we created this tool called Sensu to solve this problem for us. And then we announced it kind of the world. And at 3 months after we started working on it, we just kind of put the POC out there and saw what people said. So we built this and we gave it to the world because we wanted it to survive even if the company didn't. And spoiler alert, it didn't. So in 2013, that first Monitorama, look at all the tools that were going to be taught in the workshops. StatsD, Logstash, Graphite, D3, Sensu. I'm going to ignore R. 2014 at Monitorama, I know, I just tried to go really fast and no one notices the R up there. 2014 at Monitorama, this was the first one in PDS. Torkel, who's the creator of Grafana, which he called a hobby project at the time. How many people use Grafana? It was a hobby project in 2014. He blew the audience away when he showed what he had been working on when he split Grafana from Kibana, and he was visualizing data from both Graphite and InfluxDB. It was mind-blowing. And he said at the end, I really want to do this as a full-time job. And we were all like, can some VC give this guy money? Because this is an amazing product, right? So then fast forward, right? Everyone's a monitoring company. Most companies at this point today aren't monitoring companies anymore. Lord no, they're observability companies now. And then when we come up with a better term, there'll be that one later on. And again, it feels like that sysadmin DevOps battle kind of all over again. And I gave up fighting this when I dealt with a security monitoring company when they were like, can we be a DevSecOps company? And I'm like, I guess if you want to sound stupid, but like, could we pick a better term? Like, are we that unoriginal? So back to the original question, are we better? I think we could all agree, yeah, absolutely. We're decidedly better. We finally have options in this space. We're not stuck with like one or two kind of junk products where either you have to pay a lot of money for a really good visual experience or it's free, but there is no way to actually like consume this data. But because of the absolute explosion in SaaS-based monitoring and data products, in many ways we've moved this pain just completely off to a third party. And unless you are a monitoring company dealing with this, from your perspective, like who cares? It's their problem. I pay them to deal with it, right? But there are a lot of third parties. So this is actually, admittedly, all of data services. This is a well-known VC that puts this together. Monitoring is a big part of data services. And actually, if you go back to John Vincent's blog post, the one thing he wanted more than anything else was to link together business metrics and operational metrics, because that's kind of important. If you don't have your, if your users aren't happy, if you're not collecting money from your users, then your business isn't going to exist. So let's just use the list of Monitorama sponsors as a better way to show off just how many monitoring companies are out there. So there's duplicates, I know. I already spent way more time creating this than I care to admit. I wasn't going to deduplicate logos. And I'm sure you see a lot of companies that have come and gone, and I guarantee there's at least 1 or 2 companies on here that you're looking at like, I've never heard of them before. Pour one out for Boundary. They came, they went, right? Datadog was this little tiny, sponsor at the 2013 Monitorama, and they're like $10 billion company now, right? It's amazing to see just how many monitoring companies out there. This is just Monitorama, meaning there are a lot of monitoring companies that haven't sponsored it, that don't even know about this event. This is a fraction of the companies that are out there. So we've got a new problem. So what's the ultimate problem with literally every SaaS monitoring business out there? It is so freaking expensive. And not just in price. Expensive in 2 key and important ways. And then there's 1/3 way it's expensive that's specific to every logging company on the planet, and I'll get to that later. But I know why your SaaS product is expensive. I know. It's expensive. They're all expensive for the exact same reason. It's because of this. Because you've all taken the exact same hot mess grab bag of open source and you put it on Amazon. That's what I do. Right? And then I have to pay the margins on top and everything else. I get it. You're providing a service. It's great. But then this cost per host, per metric that I send to your service, it forces me to make poor architectural decisions. Again, I'm at a startup. I don't have money. And so maybe I send less data, or maybe I have lower resolution metrics. Reduce retention. Maybe I'm sampling when I really actually shouldn't sample. Maybe I'm trying to sample security metrics, which is like the most insane thing you would never do. Maybe, like I said, lower resolution metrics. I had one login vendor say, why don't you just send us less data? I'm like, what? Aren't I paying you to send, I'm paying you more money to send more data. You're basically telling me not to do that anymore. So it's also expensive in the time it takes from signing that contract, I want this product, and buying the thing, to me fully provisioning and using that service. It can be a lot of work and take a long time. And this is where your focus should be to all the monitoring companies out there. Ops folks are busy. So are devs too. Let's not belittle them. But ops folks, the DevOps, whatever you want to call them, you might be in their top 5 list of things to do, of projects to work on, but unless you're number 1, they're going to get to you later. And there's just no way of knowing how long it's going to take. There could be an outage, whatever else. I've seen it a million times. Someone comes up, they're like, I really love this product. I want to buy it right now. Oh, God, we just had a company-ending outage. We're in code red now for the next 6 months. And so, you're trying to sell your product. You're trying to help solve their problem, and they've got 300 other things going on. So also, I'm going to take a little aside here and tell you how salespeople are really bad at math. So at a previous company, I was running the Golang version of Graphite. So Graphite, originally written in Python. There's a community out there that have written it in Golang. It is incredibly performant. It's really nice. I was spending about $1,500 a month on the i3 instances on Amazon to just support it. And we're averaging 60,000 metrics per second. So it's like billions per day. It's a pretty good amount of metrics. And again, $1,500 a month. So a salesperson at an unnamed company tried to sell me, their solution. The list price was $50,000 per month at best. And I said to the guy, hey, if you were to give me a 50% discount right now, I still would have to say no. I'm like, literally the only way I would buy this thing is you'd have to sell it to me for about $5,000 a month. And even then, I'm paying you 3 times more than now. Does this provide 3 times more value? Can I turn it on today and immediately use it? No, right? The ROI takes forever. I have to create new dashboards. I have to install some agents. I got to go through this whole process, create new alerts. There's this sunk cost that I have in monitoring, I know. But sometimes, again, it's good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. So then if you're a monitoring company, guess what you have to do? It's a really evil thing. It's called value selling. You have to sell on value, what value can provide. And this poor sales guy who'd probably never done anything with monitoring in his life was like, well, you must have a team of 3 people spending all this money on, these people to manage this Graphite thing. I'm like, nah, dude, it just works. It just works. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a bad person to sell to. But yeah, so if you're selling monitoring products and you have to spend a lot of time value selling and you need a hug later, come and find me. So what happened with logging? 8 or 10 years ago, I think logging was still kind of an unsolved problem, but folks were actively trying. You had tools like Kibana, Logstash, obviously Elasticsearch, Graylog. No one wanted to pay for Splunk. Who here has paid for Splunk? Who here liked when that bill showed up? No, the only time you like that one is, like, I always joke, there's like two people who like, there's the people who like Splunk, they're the ones who use it, and then there's the people who pay the bill, and they're usually not the ones who like it. But the thing is, could you make a Splunk-like experience with basically a hodgepodge of open source? Yeah. Was it Splunk? No. Did that matter? Not really. I mean, you could just kind of make it work, right? And depending on who you talk to and who you ask, it was good enough to solve the problem. So I think Elastic, and this is, again, I don't work for Elastic, but I think Elastic, the quote business, was extremely surprised to find so many people using Elasticsearch and seeing it adopted for logging. Remember, it wasn't actually Elastic, the company, that had created the ecosystem around it. The community did. They pulled that together. Way back in 2011, the company that I had worked at, Sonian, we were an extremely early and probably largest user of Elasticsearch at the time. And I love Elasticsearch. We used it as the backing of our email archiving and document archiving platform. Because we had petabytes of all this data on S3, our indexes of this unstructured data were small, relatively. You know, it was maybe 2 petabytes of S3 logging data or S3 emails and documents, and the indexes were hundreds of terabytes, right? They were a fraction of the size. So again, here's where my unpopular opinion comes in. Elasticsearch, but essentially Lucene, Elasticsearch is not the storage engine. It was never designed for, and honestly, again, my opinion, is an inefficient way to store your logs. But why do we use it? Because it's so good. It's so easy to get up and running. You can spin up a single Elasticsearch node and then spin up another one and another one and another one. And I'll tell you who loves doing that. Amazon loves that. You know how they love it? They make so much money on Elasticsearch. Amazon loves it. But my biggest beef with it is you take your log files, which maybe these are compressed and they're in gzip format. You have to decompress them to index them. Indexing is going to add additional structure to your already structured, logging event data. And then maybe your compression is like 80% of the original uncompressed raw data. It's a huge explosion of your data storage. And you have to go through and basically turn off a lot of features in Elasticsearch. You have to enable best compression, turn off the off field, turn off the source field disabled. So let's go through some real numbers here. I went to the Amazon Elasticsearch cloud domain sizing thing. And if you listen to their documentation, you're going to need 18 i3 hosts for this imaginary size. So I worked it backwards. What data volume represents 18 i3 whatevers? That's 150 gigabytes of data per day. And if you store it for 30 days, that'll put us just under the 14 terabyte requirement. $26,000 a month. So can you run this workload for less? Absolutely. So forgive me for saying the term bare EC2, like you think like bare metal, it's not like bare metal, but like you can run it yourself on EC2. Use EBS, there's a bunch of scenarios here. At the end of the day, you're still spending nearly $100,000 for 30-day retention of your logging data. And 150 gigabytes, that's not a lot. If you're in the terabyte range, just multiply this. If you want 30 to 60 days, double it. You can build a hot warm setup, but network transfer is going to cost you on Amazon. And I had to do a 5 petabit network commit with Amazon just to get them to cut their price on network transfer because of moving data around Elasticsearch. So everyone has adopted, with a few exceptions, most logging companies out there use Lucene or Elasticsearch as their backend. It's why all the prices are exactly the same. There hasn't been a lot of innovation quite yet, with a few exceptions on this specific problem. So logging is hard because logging is terrible. I think we can all agree to that. But logging is hard because your logging and your logs specifically are terrible. So I went to Twitter to ask for some examples, because everyone knows when you want to see something truly terrible, head to Twitter. So Jordan Sissel popped in when I asked basically for some bad logging. He had a lot of examples of bad logging, right? Creator of Logstash. Network logs are bad, multiple complaints about anything related to Hadoop, MySQL. So then I'm just like, what's the worst log you've ever seen? This should never happen. Neat. MySQL error logs and the classic MySQL server has gone away. I love this one. One of our services used to log, "I'm not dead yet," because some people thought the application was too quiet when it was working properly. So instead of logging some relevant output about what it was doing, every minute on a timer, it just said, "I'm not dead yet." Yet. It said yet. Anyway, where's my security people? Audit D? Hot mess. There are multiple lines to have to group by time ID, which, like your mail logs, can be adjacent, but most often, they are, but not always. And then everything is actually k-value, but many of those values are actually base 64 if there's no indicator if they are. So good luck parsing that. I love this one. This is like Drama right here. A Rails app emitted a CSV log. One of the fields was a JSON dump of all the hundreds of session variables. I've seen stringified JSON inside of JSON before, but a JSON inside of CSV is a whole new level of wow. Mike's gonna win at one here. An old data store used an ASCII bell character to represent empty values. It leaked into the app logs and led to an unexpectedly noisy terminal. And that's exactly what you think it is if your volume was on. Ding, 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 ding. So like, I get it. Logs are just terrible, right? And Twitter did not disappoint, I appreciate it. So, what can we do? We can solve this problem. Some people say you should log everything. Others say you should log structured events. Guess what? You should do them both. At a previous company, we over-optimized for time series. We almost threw away our logs. The problem is at some point, and it's usually when you start caring about security, you actually want your logs. You need to go through and dumpster dive through those things. And a lot of people look at logs and just say, that's just shitty monitoring. But those security people are like, I need every single event, and I need it for all time. And as companies grow, the log just keeps growing exponentially. And it's even worse when you have logs that come in from sources that you can't control, like CloudFront, for example, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. But, so here's what I say. Are you currently working on an observability initiative, right? Start with your logs. And a lot of people have already said it today, so I'm just kind of echoing what a lot of smart people have already said. The first thing you should focus on is get your logs into a machine parsable structured format. JSON obviously comes to mind here. Why am I an advocate for that? It should be obvious, but you're gonna spend time later to create a parser for your like custom whatever logging platform, or if it's in JSON, nearly everything supports it as is. So spend your time working on things that matter, like getting your logs into a machine parsable format and store them all as JSON. This is actually a CloudFront log, and I don't control this, but I had to create a Lambda parser in order to convert it over. These might win as worst logs of all time. They don't have a normal like ISO date timestamp. Look at the top. They have date and time. I had to way down at the bottom create that into an actual date timestamp. I desperately want to find someone from Amazon who can fix this, but I think they will never fix it because everyone has basically like created their own solution here. By fixing it, they would actually break everyone. So don't have your application log thing just for the sake of logging. You know, the application that, remember we talked about, it's like the I'm still alive, that provides zero value. Put everything possible into your JSON about the request. What happened, how long it took. You got some histograms, shove them in there. Make it as big, as wide as possible of JSON. All the useful information, request ID, things you can correlate and trace around through your infrastructure. How long that request took. And then send it to your data lake. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. Please, can we come up with a better name than data lake? Every Hadoop company on the planet killed me with this data lake term. So I actually hate this term so much, I'm not even gonna use it for the rest of this talk. I'm gonna refer to it as a bagel. Which if you think about it kind of works, right? S3 storage on Amazon is basically infinite. They can buy hard drives faster than you can send them data. And you know, if you think about it, a bagel's kind of infinite. I actually found this crazy post from a blog post called Mathematically Correct Breakfast, by the way. It's actually a pretty funny find. So, but that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna build a bagel. We're gonna take all of our data and we're gonna shove it into some sort of object store, like an S3, GCP, Azure, whatever. If you're like, cloud gross, guess what? Minio has got you covered. There's a great slew of tools to help you do this. You can use a Kinesis agent to fire your data to Kinesis Firehose. Logstash, if you're already an Elk shop, turn on Logstash, S3 output. Still have it write to Elasticsearch, that's fine, but get it to S3 also. FluentD and FluentBint can not only aggregate your data, but parse it and filter it and ship it to multiple destinations. Vector is another awesome tool out there doing similar things, and Cribble is a commercial offering. So you can have all your data flow into these observability pipeline technologies, which I don't know if that's the actual term, but that's what I'm gonna call it. All your data is gonna go in as JSON. Let these tools parse out what matters. Send some of that data to Honeycomb. Send some of it to Datadog. Let's be honest, you don't use one monitoring product. No one does. You got at least 2 or 3 or a dozen of them. Send the right data to the right destination that will help you answer that question. There is no single pane of glass. There's not one tool that will answer your questions. Okay, cool. You've got your data in a whole hot mess of places. You've also got it in your bagel on S3 or GCP or whatever. Now what do? Well, guess what? You can use Athena to query it. Be very, very careful. $5 per terabyte scanned. Anyone been burned by querying in Athena here? Who's done like a $300 or $500 query? Am I the only one? It happens. You can load that data directly from S3 into Redshift. You can use it with BigQuery. There's a tool, an Apache project called Drill that can kind of power that bagel that we've created. There's some commercial offerings called Dremio that you can check out, which are pretty cool. Also commercial offerings like Snowflake as a data warehouse competitor, taking data from S3 and putting it into a warehouse that you can analyze. And then Chaos Search lets you actually search your S3 data with Elasticsearch APIs. Heads up, that's where I worked, so I'm a shareholder, but it's still pretty awesome, and I always like to talk about it. Now, let's recap. 3 easy ways, actionable ways that you can start taking progress down this observability world you want to get into. It's going to take you a long time, and especially if you're an enterprise, everything takes longer than you think. You got to make some forward progress, and I think moving your logs into JSON and putting as much context into that data is a great place to go. Log because something happened, though. That's the biggest one. Don't just log because, things are whatever, there's no value, there's no content, I'm not dead yet, I'm still here, things like that. Log because an event occurred, you did a thing, the code did a thing. And then, ship it off to your bagel, and you can do really cool stuff with that. And then please, can we crowdsource? We're going to be at the bar later. That's a great way and a great time to come up with something better than this. Let's crowdsource a better name than Data Lake. So I would love to hear about your observability journey, your monitoring journey. What cool stuff are you doing in monitoring? What interesting technologies are you working with? Slide into my DMs, at Cheslock on Twitter. My DMs are open. My emails are there. A copy of this talk is at this bit.ly link, which for whatever reason, I'm bad with computers, gave me a JMP link. I don't know what's up with that, but it works. I will also dump the PDF into the talk Pete Cheslock Slack channel. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.